The dark world of microorganisms. I'll start with viruses. Are they living, or are they just fragments of genetic material that's surrounded by a protein case? Scientists aren't sure. But some things they are sure about is that viruses are parasites. Have you ever heard someone say, "Oh, I can't live without you"? Well, that's so true for viruses because they are obligate parasites. They depend totally on a living host. During that brief period when they're not inside a host, they're called virons. Because they're obligate parasites, viruses are tough to detect. We have to culture them on a living tissue or something like a blood medium to keep them alive. Viruses can crystallize and yet somehow survive. And viruses are not even composed of cells. They are very strange. Viruses mutate easily, and this is because they only have one strand of genetic material, RNA. Now, some of them can do a clever enzyme polymerase and turn into DNA. Now, because they only have that one strand, they have a poor repair mechanism. You and I, every night when we sleep, there's a polymerase that slides across the DNA and repairs it. Viruses don't have this. And because they lack it, they mutate rapidly. And that makes it difficult for the host immune system to detect and destroy viruses because they're constantly changing. We develop memory cells, but the memory cells don't help us when there's a new strain of virus out there. A fourth basic feature of viruses are their core of nucleic acids. This is usually a genome, I mentioned RNA, single strand, but they can convert to a DNA. Surrounding that genome is a coat of protein called a capsid. The capsid is what protects and gives the virus its shape. For example, a helix is a tight coil, and this capsid we see in things like the rabies virus. A polyhedron capsid we find in viruses such as the herpes. And then many viruses have a complex capsid. That means they might have both helic and polyhedron shapes. And here's an example, the phage virus. Very strange. You can see that some scientists think that perhaps viruses came down on a meteorite and that they are truly an alien form of life. And it's almost believable, isn't it, when you look at these? They're not even cells. Resorted RNA, this is kind of what's called a jackpot event. We find it a lot in the influenza evolution. What happens here is when a virus infects somebody or something, it's going to take some of the genetic material that's lying around inside the cell and it's going to copy it. Here's an example. The H1N1 swine influenza that swept through much of the world recently. It's not a recent virus. There are fragments of RNA dating back to 1987 from a pig farm in Indiana, and there's even older viral fragments from birds in Asia. So what we have is a jackpot event. Every time this H1N1 infects a host, it snatches up some new RNA, and there you have it, constantly mutating. I've talked about that. Reproductive pathways. I mentioned that they need a host. They got to have you. They survive by using the genome of their host for viral replication. And that's a very strange thing. So let's just look at an example. One pathway is called lytic. Lytic means to burst, and that's what they do. They burst our cells. It tends to be acute, which means short-term, and these tend to be self-limiting. That means your body takes care of it. Things such as colds and influenza are common lytic sorts of viral pathways. We'll start with the initial infection, and this is when the virus attaches to the host at a receptor site on the cell membrane. We've used this information, by the way, to block viruses by producing antiviral medicines that are going to bind to the receptor site before the virus can. So we beat them to the spot. The viruses have no place to attach. They float around in the bloodstream for a while, and we destroy them. So it's a neat technique we have. But let's say the virus is attached. It's going to insert its genome, and if you look at the green arrow, it's showing, or it's pointing to the viral genome passing into the host cell. Replication stage, this is where the virus genetic material codes for production of more of itself. And it does this by, if you remember, it's a piece of RNA. So it's going to say, hey, make some more viruses, which is very strange. This is your own body cell. So when you eat a cheeseburger, some of that cheeseburger is used in making viruses because that DNA has tricked your body into making viruses. Wow. Outbreak or lysis. The virus is going to release enzymes that dissolve the host cell membrane. They want out of there, right? They want to move on and infect other cells and even other people. The outbreak continues until, hopefully, the host immune system detects and destroys the virus. So something like a cold or a flu. In modern times, self-limiting. Historically, though, this could kill you. Lysogenic is a much darker, evil pathway, and it's something that we all experience, though. They will produce diseases that are chronic or lifelong. Many of them you have forever. Some of the retroviruses, it's a group of viruses, carry their own enzyme, which is called a reverse transcriptase. And this allows them to convert their RNA into DNA. And I'll tell you why. The viral DNA is going to attach to the host DNA because, see, we have DNA, and they want to be like us, so they make a copy of the RNA and attach it to us. Examples are HIV, herpes, hepatitis B, chickenpox. You have most of these for your entire life. Start with the steps. We have initial infection. So this is similar to the lytic. The virus is going to attach. It's going to inject its genome into the host cell. But here's the difference. The viron, if you remember viron, it was when it's outside, it's going to attach its genome plasmid, which is just a piece of the DNA, directly into the host DNA. Now when you study this unit, you want to flip back and see the lytic, their DNA does not become part of us. Right? We call it provirus, and it is a lifelong part of the host genetic material. Replication, sometimes called the window phase, because there's few symptoms. Let's say a guy slept with a prostitute. Oh my gosh, he thinks the next day, did I catch HIV? Well, he won't know for a while, because if he's healthy, every time that cell undergoes mitosis, a new copy is made. So we go from 1 cell to 2 to 4 to 16 and on till there's millions of copies. But he's feeling great because there's no symptoms yet. That's why it's called the window phase. So he's going along feeling pretty good about things, and then he has his first cold or some sort of illness or emotional upset that depresses his immune system. And we have a triggering event. This may occur several months after the initial infection, and now we have activated the lytic cycle. The cells are going to become active and burst out of the host cell. We've been here before. Enzymes are released by the virus. They're going to dissolve the host cell. The viruses want out of that cell so they can infect other cells and other people. He's going to test positive for HIV at this point, and he's going to have some struggles ahead. So this is a good one to avoid. Another virus to avoid is genital herpes. Many people are familiar with herpes simplex 1, HSV1, that causes cold sores, around the lips and in the, around the mouth. What they don't realize is that a very close relative, HSV2, may also infect the lips and mouth, but their primary target is the genitals. And this makes this whole business of oral sex rather frightening when people have different partners. I don't need to say anything more there. Window phase, very short, 2 to 20 days before the outbreak and ulcers form. You get this one for a lifetime. There is no cure. Genital warts, I didn't want to put a picture of this one, so I put a plantar wart. But they're related. It's caused by the papilloma virus HPV. Window phase about 3 weeks to 3 months, at which time warts in the genitals appear, and they are very uncomfortable, and they are contagious. A sad thing about the genital warts is it may lead to cervical cancer. It converts normal cells into cancer cells. The good news, HPV vaccine, many parents, including myself, have made sure that their daughters have this. And it has nothing to do with sexual activity. I think it's a good, solid vaccine to protect them for who knows what. We can't predict. That's coming in the future. Lysogenic viruses can be carcinogens, and that is a word that means something that induces cancer tumor formation. I've mentioned the reverse transcriptase several times, and that is one way that the virus can attach its DNA to the host DNA and change it forever. So maybe you recover from chickenpox. Okay, maybe you recover from herpes, but it resides within your body forever, sometimes hiding out on a nerve ganglion, waiting for the right conditions for it to outbreak once again. Many ways that virus induce cancers. I'm going to give you two of them. One is just to stimulate a pre-oncogene in a cancer-coding gene. We have many genes, and think of these as fragile. These are fragile genes that are easily converted into cancer. And this is why some smokers never get a certain kind of cancer, because they don't have the oncogene for it. Here we have oncogene for hepatitis B in the liver. That can be, the switch can be turned on just by a virus. I talked about genetic transformation now several times, and that is where viruses such as the herpes virus can turn on the switch, turning a normal cervical cell into a cancerous one. Here is our review. Much of it is repetitious. Viruses are all the good parasites. They cannot live without you. They're virons when they're outside of us. They can crystallize. They're non-cellular. They're kind of alien-like, I think. RNA can mutate, change into a DNA. They have a nucleic acid core, which is really a genome, surrounded by a protein capsid. It can be helical or polyhedral or complex. The resorted RNA concept is that viruses snatch up available genetic material from the host. So they take a little pig virus when they infect a pig. They steal a little avian virus when they infect a bird. And human virus, jackpot event. Lytic pathway, these are the acute self-limiting, at least in modern times. Initial infection, they're going to attach to a receptor site, and they're going to trick the host DNA into making more viruses. The outbreak, they're going to dissolve the membrane and move out to attack others. Lysogenic is similar, but there is a retrovirus transcriptase enzyme that's going to allow them to attach a provirus directly onto our own DNA. So it is a permanent part of our body. And this is where some people are confused. They think, oh, the government's moving too slowly, we should have a cure for AIDS. But take a look. A person has millions of copies of the provirus in their own DNA. It's a genetic disease. It's a genetic disease. And how do you cure something like that? It's not going to be simple. Window phase is when we have the mitotic division and there's no symptoms generally. The provirus is just being copied. Finally, there's a triggering event, the first cold or illness, and the lytic cycle steps in. We move to an outbreak where the virus is going to dissolve the host membrane and move out to attack other people, other cells. HSV2 and HSV1 can cause herpes, which are sores around the mouth, but also around the genitals. 2 to 20 day is the typical window phase. Genital warts, which is preventable with that HPV vaccine. This is 3 weeks to 3 months, so quite a variable window phase. It can convert cervical cells into from normal cancer cells from cervical cells. Finally, viruses have the capability of causing cancer. They can be carcinogens, either through stimulating pre-oncogenes. Those are fragile cells within our body that doesn't take much to nudge them into becoming cancerous. Or they can genetically transform cells by using that transcriptase attaching to DNA. I've talked about that one. The virus idea as aliens I would never test you on, but it sure is interesting, I think.